Well, welcome everybody to our Mesa City Council on March 6, 2025. And maybe we'll get some rain today and tomorrow the rest. So it'll be a good change. All the members of council are present and we'll just dive right into business. Item 1A is here a presentation on Culdesac development for the city-owned property at the southwest corner of University and Mesa Drive. I'm assuming, okay, Jeff, Ryan, Jimmy, thank you. The time is now yours.
Good morning, Mayor, Council. Good morning. Jeff McVeigh, Manager of Urban Transformation. Today I have with me Jimmy Tracchio, Downtown Transformation Project Manager. I'm also pleased to welcome Ryan Johnson, co-founder and CEO of Culdesac, to be able to talk about Culdesac today. But first, we're going to kick off, and Jimmy's going to set the stage and kind of remind us how we got here today.
So in late summer, fall of 2023, we went through the RFP process for new proposals for Site 17. For the goal for that, what you see on the screen, to develop a vibrant and active mixed-use neighborhood with public amenities that complements the neighborhood and supports downtown. That grew out of the Transform 17 guiding principles. So for the RFP, we had asked any submissions to follow those going forward. When we, in October, we had brought it to council for direction, and the direction at that point was to proceed with Culdesac. At that point, since then, we've been working on development agreement, purchase agreement, and we've also done 2 appraisals of the land. City has done one in Culdesac themselves, and the Culdesac appraisal came in at $9.7 million, whereas the city's appraisal came back at $11.2 million. So that's where we are to work from.
Jimmy, can I interrupt? I'm sorry, right off the first slide, she starts. Oh my gosh. I just want to connect, and we can go back to it later, on these appraisal prices versus what is, and maybe I need to think about it. It just came to mind on slide number, I want to say 29, where it mentioned the price. Oh, what's this one? 29, yeah. Phase 1 purchase price, $2.74 million. So I just want to connect those two at some point.
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
we will.
For sure.
Thank you.
And with that, we would like to hand the floor over to Ryan to be able to kind of present and give you an overview of who Culdesac is and the project that
Jeff, before we do that, let's maybe Mr. Brady, you can give us a little history on, you know, Transform 17. Let's start there. I mean, for those that are listening, you know, we've owned this property for quite a few years, and I don't remember that number of years, but it's been quite a few. And then we've had a number of proposals through the years. Why don't you give us an overview before Ryan takes over?
Wow, okay. Well, even before I got here, right, this has been a property in the city that's been under lots of discussion. I know if we go way back in time, at one point, this was going to be the future site of Holcomb Stadium. It was going to be a spring training stadium. And it went back that far. Then at some point, and someone's going to have to help me, I know there was a developer that came in and worked with the city to put in a water park.
Conference center / water park.
Water park. And at that, as part of that, the city did go in and acquire the homes that were in this area to make available, or make this area available for that development. After which the city had purchased all the properties, the developer declined to move forward with the development. So here go, that's kind of where the city ended up holding on or having possession of all this land for some time. There's been some critique of the city's efforts to do that and to acquire the land. I think it was maybe a modest income area, but that area was purposely, all those properties, those homes, I don't remember how many homes were there, but was acquired by the city for that future development. And after they had acquired the property, the future development declined to continue. You can kind of just tell by the way, you know, the streets are still there from when that subdivision was there. So since I've been here, so that was probably 25 years ago.
I believe late 1990s.
More than that, 30 years ago. But since I've been here, I know we have gone through multiple rounds of trying to work with a master planning and trying to find an opportunity to bring in developers' proposals to develop this. We've come very close. The council's gone through multiple selection processes, but often we get to a point where the developer just can't make it work, pencil out as far as the type of development. There's always kind of a challenge working. This is kind of in an interesting location. It's kind of on the, I would say, the very edge of the core downtown. It's across from the Delta Hotel. It's just south of a retail center, but it's directly north of a historic neighborhood, a single-family residential area that is kind of just sits in that. Is it the Wilbur Historic District? Am I saying that right? And so we're always being sensitive to the type of development that would happen here and how it would impact or mitigate it, or trying to make it consistent with that development, and then looking at higher density as it moves towards university. So it's been, unfortunately, for the last 30 years, the city has not, or maybe more, has been working working diligently to develop this 25
gross acres.
25 gross acres of property, but we've just never been successful. So here we are again with another proposal, and hopefully we can take this across the finish line. Anyway, that's.
All right. Thank you for the overview. All right, Ryan.
All right, thanks, Chris, Jeff, and Jimmy. Good morning, Mayor and Council. I'm Ryan Johnson, and I'm excited to share with you our vision for Culdesac Mesa, which can bring energy and people to downtown Mesa. And at Culdesac, we prioritize community, mobility, and open space. And I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I grew up in Phoenix as a third generation. Family moved from Minnesota because it was too cold. You probably heard that before. And when I was growing up, Mesa was the most fun place in the world, whether that was the Museum of Natural History or the Golfland Sunsplash or soccer matches. But as I became an adult, I realized how much it was really a pillar of the city and even underrated. And today it has so much potential. And we're really excited about being part of Site 17 for downtown. We have a number of team members. We've got four with us today. And we have decades of experience building projects all over the country. And at Culdesac, our flagship is Culdesac Tempe. We'll tell you a little bit more about that. We also have 2 for-sale townhome projects under construction in Atlanta, and Mesa is our next project. And out of curiosity, how many people have been to Culdesac Tempe? Decent number. I've seen some of you there. For the others, I would love to show you sometime. So Culdesac, now that it's open, it's a vibrant place, and we actually get more visitors every day than residents. And it's brought up a lot of attention to Tempe because it's really shown a different type of housing that brings great amenities, and the residents love it, and the neighbors love it. And will bring similar energy to Mesa. We have an award-winning retail program. We have full commercial leases. We also have these live workspaces that have become boutique shops. This is a Japanese stationery store where they're all different, they're all local, and collectively it makes it a great place to visit. And it lowers the bar for people opening up a brick and mortar store, and it's created a lot more businesses as a result. This is what it looks like. This is a family that lives there biking through it. This project feels 15 degrees cooler than the apartment complex next door because there's not a drop of asphalt, the white reflects heat, and there's lots of shade. And it's a vibrant, energetic place, whether that's the residents having events, this is our plaza, or people visiting to shop or to eat, or one of the many events that we throw. And I'll make a plug, we're throwing a St. Patrick's Day event on Saturday. We're expecting over 1,000 people and hope to see some of you there. And this is what inside the apartments look like. We say people want a great neighborhood at a good price. And now we have 288 units open. The second phase just opened in December. We're already 86% leased, and we have high renewal rates. But the biggest question that we get is, when can I buy one? And That's what Mesa's for. It's a unique retail destination with over 20 local businesses, whether that's Cocina Chihuas, which is on USA Today's list of best new restaurants in the country. There's only 3 in the state. Busan Mart, it's a Korean market with prepared foods. They also have a K-pop section, and I know all of you are big K-pop fans. We also have Archer's Bikes, which is a great e-bike store. And one of our retailers is So Used, which has been a great success in 3 parts. They started with the pop-up table at our market, then they opened their first brick and mortar store, and now they have a full commercial lease with twice the space, and they're still growing. And we love our small businesses, and we love even more when they become medium-sized businesses. And how do we do it? Through strong public-private collaboration. We collaborate with cities on right-sizing parking requirements. We worked with the city of Tempe to show them the trends of where things are going with transportation and new lifestyles. Also align with city's economic development priorities. This is a barber. They were the last tenant in a city of Tempe-owned property that they wanted to redevelop. So we helped relocate them to Culdesac, Tempe, and I hope you like my haircut from them today. We also helped the city get a federal grant that was used for street improvements. This is the Smith Road Improvement Project. And now let's talk about Mesa. We're so excited about the future of Mesa. And here's us getting in the metaphorical Waymo, going from Culdesac, Tempe to Mesa. And how many people have tried a Waymo so far? Quite a bit of people. So this is something that is going to be the biggest change to real estate of our lifetimes. And it's only a matter of when, but we're building for that future. Where we're at in the public realizing how big of a deal it's going to be is recently been hearing from lots of parents who now feel safe to send their kids to school, and they have effusive praise and say, now I have my freedom back. We first heard about Site 17 because one of our first employees went to Westwood High School. He was part of their championship robotics team. And as we learn more about it, this downtown has a very bright future with ASU, all the new developments, the great shop, and we think we could be a big part of that and really augment what's going on and accelerate it. And for what we're going to build there, 1,000 residential units across the site, 25 to 50,000 square feet of retail, and 25 to 50,000 amenity square feet. And this is going to be a bold, energetic vision that brings more attention and people to Mesa with quality home ownership opportunities, with right-sized parking, and it'll bring a lot of small businesses. And this is our vision to be a keynote, not just of Mesa, but of Greater Phoenix. That's a remarkable car light hub that has home ownership opportunities, it pushes sustainability, grows talent, and sets the standard as a leading development in Arizona. And it's going to offer quality infill home ownership opportunities with strong ties enabled by home ownership. It's going to have quality urban design, and also we're going to have lots of art. And I know Mesa has lots of great art. Some of our artists have done pieces in Mesa, and we'll have more of those on Site 17. With a sustainable lifestyle aided by integrated features and vibrant retail. And let's talk about the home ownership opportunities that create long-lasting community. The first phase will have for sale 2 and 3 bedroom townhomes. They'll be fee simple with dedicated parking spots and live-work units that give people the opportunity to open up a small business. In future phases, we'll have additional types from studios up to 3 bedrooms with varying structures from for sale to for rent. And this is some of our design inspiration. It's going to be quality urban design that draws on desert modern and historical Spanish influences. And for that sustainable lifestyle, there'll be sustainable amenities available for residents. The desert adaptive design, it makes indoor-outdoor living a reality. Talked earlier about how we moderate the heat island effect. And it's a better quality of life, not just for residents, but for neighbors. And we'll bring that vibrant retail is here, whether that's pop-up tables, live workspaces so people can open their first brick and mortar store, or full commercial leases. And we remain committed to developing the 1,000 units. This was the site plan you're familiar with. And this is the phasing that you're familiar with. And we've gotten a lot of feedback, and we've been working on a lot with the team, and wanted to share a little bit of that here. So phase 1 with 144 sale townhomes, that piece is wider, and you'll notice phase 2. So one of the things we've heard a lot is that people are excited about ASU having a stronger presence in downtown, including with housing. And we've seen how much ASU did for downtown Phoenix and really accelerated that. I think we're in the early innings of that here in Mesa. And so we've been talking with them, and we're not sure if or when we can get something done to have them part of it, but we're designing phase 2 such that it could work with or without them. But this is going to be a project with lots of great pieces, and I would love to answer any questions. That's been a pleasure working with the team, and we're as excited as when we got started.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you, Ryan. Council, any questions? Who wants to kick it off? Well, if nobody does, I'll do it. But
Okay.
Jen, go ahead.
I have some questions. First of all, the one I started with, tying in, and that's on slide number 29.
Mayor, Councilmember Duff, if you think it beneficial, we could go through and walk through the business terms.
Yeah.
And then take questions at the end, if you think that's
Excellent.
helpful.
Thank you.
Sure, go ahead.
So Ryan painted a picture of a wonderful development, and then he hands it off to us, and we get to talk about the really fun stuff of the business terms of a purchase agreement and a development agreement. To start, we want to make it clear that we're structuring this deal in a way to help protect the city as much as possible, as well as to reflect the fact that this is a very large site. And it is not reasonable for us to expect that Culdesac is going to spend a bunch of money on engineering and design to be able to really flush out what is able to be there. We've seen a concept design that we've all been working towards, and that we're all happy that that's the direction we're going. But the reality is that once you get into final design, it's going to change. So we've tried to structure this in a way that gives Culdesac the standing in the land, that gives them the confidence to be able to go and expend the money, but still at the same time protect the city's interest, so that we are not going to release the land without confidence that we're going to see the type of development that we're here talking about today. So to accomplish that, we're structuring this in three separate purchase agreements, essentially, phase by phase. For each phase, there will be the requirement that there's a development agreement that is approved and executed on the site, that Culdesac has gone through every step that is necessary to entitle the property with the zoning, and that they have actually obtained their building permits prior to us actually closing on the sale of the land. So at that point, we will have the knowledge and the confidence that Culdesac is able to move forward, and we also have an understanding of their financial capacity to be able to deliver the project before we ever sell a piece of dirt. Once we have closed on the property, Culdesac will have 24 months from that period to execute the purchase agreement. I'm sorry, they'll have 24 months after executing the purchase agreement to close on the property. That includes all of the due diligence time. So that 24 months is the time that it's going to take to do the zoning entitlements to the building permits. After they have closed on the property, they have 12 months in order to commence construction on the project. And Councilmember Duff, to your question, the purchase price that we are showing there, $2.74 million, it's an estimate based off of the square footage of the land that we think, as we know it today. It'll change a little bit as we refine the actual boundaries of each phase, but that is reflective of the Culdesac appraised value of $11.65 per square foot.
So that original amount was for the entire property?
That was for the entire property, yes.
Okay. Let me look at that. I don't know. I must have misread it because I thought it said phase 1. Okay. Phase 1, approximately 9.7 million. City, 11.2.
Maybe we have the wrong slides in.
Okay,
but,
this is on slide number
yes.
2.
Yes.
Councilwoman Duff, slide number 2, that is the total appraised value
Oh,
for
total.
the full project.
Oh, okay, so not phase one. Oh,
Correct.
okay, see, the
Yes.
one you're looking at and the one
Oh, the one that's loaded has phase one.
was
I'm sorry.
uploaded, I'm sorry. I was looking at my iPad and not paying attention to the screen. I apologize. Okay, got it.
So the phases are broken down by purchase price of the parcels. And so phase one, you're saying is 2.74
Correct.
million to purchase that, to take it down.
Correct.
And then within, they have, from the time they close, 24 months to execute the purchase agreement?
From
Or
the
is that-
time, from the date that we execute the purchase agreement, there'll be 24 months to close.
To close, okay. And then after that, another 12 months.
12 months to
So we're
begin
talking
construction.
3 years.
3 years, yes. Potentially 3 years, depending on how quickly we can entitle the property and how quickly the cul-de-sac is able to commence construction.
Well, that would be a question for Ryan.
Yeah, we'd like to break ground tomorrow. Is that okay?
Okay,
Are you continuing on that, or should I
Yes.
just jump in with that?
yeah, jump in.
I was going to prompt you on the development agreement deal points, assuming, oh, here,
Oh,
okay.
we could,
All right, because what I made notes on last night was a little different than some here, so I might be, anyway, yeah, if you can just go through those.
sure. Continuing on with the purchase agreement, this is a three-phase project. So we have established a cadence. So once cul-de-sac closes on the first phase, they would have the option to take an option on this next phase of the development. That option would essentially have to be exercised on the date of closing of phase one. So on phase one closing, cul-de-sac will choose to whether or not they want to exercise the option on phase two. If they choose to exercise the option on phase two, they will provide a $100,000 option payment to the city. And then that would start the clock on a 36-month window for them to be able to entitle and move forward with construction on the second phase. There would be, we are working through what they are right now, but there will be prerequisites in order to be able to exercise an option on a future phase. Those prerequisites could include such things as a certain percentage of completion of construction on the previous phase, or evidence of financial capacity to be able to develop the next phase, or it could be a combination of both. Culdesac has been very bullish, and we want to encourage that. So if they have the ability to take down two phases at the same time, we are going to provide the option, should they be able to provide the financial capacity and show us that they can deliver both phases, that they would be able to take down phase 2 and 3 at the same time. A key note here is that we are still working through what purchase price, what appraisal, or which version of the appraisals that we are going to use as this to establish the future purchase price of phase 2 and 3. We would base it off of one of the existing appraisals or a blending of the two appraisals with an annual CPI adjuster, so that if it's 5 years from now, we'll have had 5 years of CPI adjustments to that appraised value. And now, with that, I'm going to hand over to Jimmy, and he's going to give us an overview of the development agreement.
Next slide. For the development agreement, the minimum improvements, we've said, as Ryan mentioned, 1,000 units. 140 of those are the for-sale townhomes that are part of phase 1. Buildings throughout the site will be 2 to 5 stories in height. And then the minimum of 25,000 square feet of commercial retail space, and then another 25,000 square feet of residential amenity space. When Ryan presented a little early, he said anywhere between 25,000 and 50,000, so it could be much bigger than that, but that's what we said at the minimum. Open spaces and green space, that will both be public and private. That we've not finalized how much of that space will be used, but we're working on getting to a point where we'll know what the square footage is. And then 800 to 1,000 parking spaces to accommodate the residents of the project. On-site public improvements will include things like the open space as well as streetscapes and mobility. So in order to get people around the site, whether it's car-free, walking, shade, things like that. The replatting of the land, and then the public access easements to the open space. Next slide. And then, as mentioned, as for phase 1, it'll be the 140 for-sale townhome units that are up against the Wilbur neighborhood. And then minimum area publicly accessible space, and then the plan would be commence construction 12 months after the close of sale, and then 24 months to complete that, which we do have some contingencies in there just in case there's unforeseen things that hold up. There will be some extra time added on at the in the development agreement so they can keep moving. So.
Within the development agreement, the city has a certain number of obligations as well. The first is that we own the land, so we'll have to consent to the replatting of the land. There are, as we discussed earlier, there's an existing street system that exists, and that street system isn't necessarily going to align with what Culdesac's vision and concept is. So we will agree to and help abandon portions of right-of-ways, and in some instances, entire right-of-ways such as Wilbur Road. Now, one of the biggest and most important elements of this proposal is the reinvestment of land sale proceeds back into public improvements. For the first phase of the project, Culdesac has requested that 100%, so $2.74 million, thereabouts, depending on what the land area ends up being, would be reinvested in to the project as reimbursement for public improvements. Now, it is our intent, the city's intent, that those reinvestments would be for enhanced public improvements. And when I say enhanced, I say things like streetscapes, parks, open space, things that are publicly accessible. The $2.74 million represents about 35 to 40% of what Culdesac estimates today to be their future infrastructure costs. Now, that is a very rough order of magnitude because the level of concept design doesn't allow a whole lot of engineering to be able to flush that out, but it represents somewhere in the neighborhood of 35 to 40% of what the infrastructure costs that Culdesac will experience. For future phases, we are negotiating different proportions, and Culdesac recognizes that the city's perspective is that future phases, that proportion would be significantly less. Today, we're talking about future phases of no more than about 30% of the land purchase value would be able to go back to reimburse for public improvements in future phases.
So Jeff, on that topic, do we typically do that, reimburse 100% on these public improvements for this type of investment? Mr. Brady, maybe you can share some light, or?
Mayor and council, if I can say from my perspective, this is a unique arrangement that for this project that we haven't had on other projects. Other projects we have definitely reimbursed, or not, I should say, we have not necessarily reimbursed for public improvements, for public infrastructure, but we have funded public infrastructure that supports projects. I can say the previous project that we had worked on for Site 17 with Mira Vista that we never got to the stage of being able to present development agreements, it was going to include a similar reimbursement model.
Is this a negotiable item?
Sure, and I think
I'm just asking the question.
No. So it's a great question. No, the answer is for a total developer, we don't usually do 100%. But as I understand what is being proposed here is that the first phase is a request for 100%, the 2.74 million. So, but when we conclude the entire project across the board, I think I'm comfortable in that first phase because that's the highest risk. It's the opportunity to prove up the concept. I think we appreciate Ryan's effort in working with us on the home ownership. So I think there's some opportunity for us as the community to be participating at that level. However, what I would suggest is in the subsequent phases that it may not necessarily continue at that level. And so maybe over the totality of the project, it would be much less than 100%, right? And I would caution, or just caution, say I don't think all of the infrastructure impacts have been calculated on this project, specifically electrical. So I think there's still some conversations, but if that's also going to be on the city, right, to help support that. So I think there's an opportunity to find a way to use the proceeds to help the developer and their initial development, but also maybe to offset some of the costs the city would have to extend such as electrical. So I think in phase one, certainly 100% is not typical, but because this is phase one of three phases, and I think it's the most important phase, and the amount isn't, frankly, that significant, I think we'd be comfortable. But I think in subsequent phases, we wouldn't expect to continue at that level, and we'd want to see that step down so that once it's all completed, it would be much less than 100%.
Mayor, Council, to give a little context, with the current discussions we're having about the reimbursements in phase 2 and 3, is expected that over the entire property, that the reimbursement amount would be 50%. So 100% in phase 1, 30% in phase 2, and 30% in phase 3 would average out to 50% across the entire property. And you know, to provide a little context for the incentives in phase 1, Chris mentioned it, but staff is giving significant consideration to the opportunity to bring for sale product to downtown. I looked at it last night. The last for sale product that we had developed in downtown, besides the very rare single family house that was built on a lot, was the late 1980s. Robeson Street Villas, and actually, interestingly enough, the Mesa Park townhomes, which are the 3-story townhomes on the east side of Site 17, those were also the late 80s. So that was the last time we had an attached for sale product in downtown. To help encourage for sale products is one of the reasons that we're supportive of the incentives that have been requested. In addition to that, Culdesac has made a compelling argument that, given to the current financing and construction conditions, that these incentives are well, the fact that we don't have a supply of this type of housing to show that there is a demand is that the market is not responding, is not going to there is a certain level of risk in the financial markets. Culdesac has made a compelling argument to show us the financial need to be able to deliver the products that we want to see here too.
Thank you, Jeff. Councilmember Duff, do you have some more?
Yeah, I mean, I
And then we'll
could
go
take
to
up a lot of time, but I'll try to be brief. The other, the main questions were on this development agreement, you know, the deal points. There was reimbursement and non-dedicated portion of construction and sales tax in negotiation.
Sure. So if I may, I'll just run through this last slide, and then we'll be ready for questions. So I should have started with this slide because it's much less to talk about. As we always do in downtown, the city is going to provide essentially concierge service for this project, essentially help them through the zoning entitlement process to the extent that we can to make sure that it's smooth, speedy and smooth. We'll also, as we are allowed by state statute, provide offsets for previous impact fees. The reality is that it's likely that there will be no impact fee offsets because our last impact fees, public safety, will retire in 2026 before Culdesac will have a permit to pull. We will also co-sponsor applications for any state and federal grants that could help with achieve our shared mobility goals. And then, Councilmember Duff, to your point, we are discussing the reimbursement of non-dedicated portion of construction sales tax. That is something that we are still discussing. It is the city's position that any such incentive would be tied to the provision by Culdesac of that unique retail that they have in Tempe, so that the reimbursement of sales tax, the construction sales tax, is helping to support the achievement of the unique retail in the project that we're hoping to see.
By helping with the cost of the offering, offsetting the cost of the lease rates? I mean, what does that look like? I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with these kind of terms.
Again, it would be something where we would be using the construction sales tax rebate to, again, reimburse for costs for public infrastructure or public improvements that would support the development of the retail component.
Okay, I got it.
Is there a timeline on that?
The retail component, I think Culdesac is looking more towards phase 2 and phase 3 for that element.
Ms. Spilsbury?
Yeah, go ahead.
Ms. Spilsbury?
So,
I think
you
she
wanna go ahead?
deferred to
Okay.
you.
Well, she had one more thing.
Okay.
More than one thing. So we have to go through entitlement, right? We can't do form-based code or just, we have to go through entitlement process? I think I've asked this before, but it's been a long time since we've been to this point?
Mayor, Councilmember Duff, the Site 17 was specifically left out of the form-based code when we adopted the form-based code. It was such a large area of land that to arbitrarily apply the form-based code transects to it didn't make sense, because we knew that it would be configured in a way that we wanted to be able to apply the transects specific to the development, so it fit the development. So we will have to go through an entitlement process no matter what. From a zoning perspective, we're looking at probably using more of a PAD model, but it will probably have a lot of elements that you would recognize from a form-based code.
And we didn't entitle, I guess, in the last development. No.
We
Close.
got down the path
Yeah,
a ways,
okay.
but we never got to the point of actually bringing zoning cases forward.
Okay, I see. Okay, all right. Just curious on the market rate. I'm very excited, more than 40 years or around 40 years, since we've had a lot of people inquire, as Ryan is alluding to. Is that market rate, like what do you have, is that even decided at this time as far as square footage, what target market, anything like that?
So in the first phase, it'll be 2 and 3 bedroom for sale townhomes, and then in future phases, it'll be studios up to 3 bedrooms. So we want to have a variety of price points and sizes for different needs.
The studios would be for sale as well?
The studios will be in future phases,
Okay.
likely for rent.
Okay, and is that more targeted for the ASU students looking for studios, or not necessarily? Is that the intent?
There's broad demand. I mean, the National Association of Realtors did a study that every generation would prefer on that. The majority would prefer to live in a walkable neighborhood, and that's what we've seen in terms of who's been at Culdesac, Tempe, and obviously Mesa is different, but the demand is pretty broad. For the ASU portion specifically, if you're asking about it, we think there's demand from the ASU students that want to have a place that's a little quieter than downtown Tempe.
Yeah. It's getting into the weeds as far as the layout and how it affects, the surrounding properties. But, so the townhomes, getting back to the for sale, asking for a friend. Like, what are you building in Atlanta would be similar? What size are those, the square foot? What, are we going to be in the upper mark? I mean, as far as price point, do you have any? I'm just wondering if it's going to be a price that is going to be, I have no idea what townhomes would go for, especially for new construction, but I hope it's in a moderate rate that would appeal to everybody.
Yeah, the construction prices are still high, but in terms of the prices, we think that these will be starting in the 3s.
Oh, wow, that's less than I thought. I was expecting a lot more than that.
High 3s, but.
Don't push it, Ryan, don't push it.
It depends on how the market evolves, but yeah.
Okay. And and I noticed in this, one of the slides said condos for sale as well.
We put condos / townhomes, different configurations might work for sale. One of the challenges with the for sale market is the construction liability defect insurance. And so when you go tall with for sale, it becomes quite a challenge. But for sale townhomes work.
Hopefully there's a bill at the legislature. We'll see if it gets here.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an issue. So you have a lot of retail space, but there's not going to be office other than that live-work environment?
The live work offers an opportunity for that. There's the potential that there could be office in phase 3. It'll depend upon the market demand. As you know, during COVID, demand for office space went down, but also there's signs of life in that market.
Yeah. Okay, and last comment. I appreciate having more of a Spanish architecture there, especially it was an Escobedo neighborhood. It was, when we laid the land, it was a Mexican or Latino neighborhood and stuff like that. I'm going back to that, I think, as kind of recovering some of that culture and history. I've seen some great projects, especially one in Tucson. It was a Mercado at the Menlo Park or something. They have barrio type things. I don't know, but I think it'd be a refreshing architecture that we don't have it in downtown, and connects to the history of the land. So
Yeah, I think you're gonna love it.
All right, Ms. Spilsbury.
For now. I have kind of a more general question. So since these development agreements are for phase one, will the DAs come back for phase two, phase three to us? And as far as future zoning cases, like, we're going to see this several more times, I'm assuming?
Mayor, Councilmember Spilsbury, exactly. We will have a development agreement over the entire property, but each phase will have to have a separate development agreement, well, essentially amendment to that original development agreement for each subsequent phase. So that you will, again, have an opportunity to see this multiple times. We will go through an overall entitlement process for the entire property, but it is likely that we will have refinements of that entitlement for each phase. So there will be a zoning entitlement, development agreement entitlement for each phase.
And what do we actually vote on?
You will be voting on a purchase agreement, authorizing the city manager to enter into a purchase agreement. Within that purchase agreement will be the development agreement as an exhibit. So you'd be approving both the purchase agreement and development agreement. We wouldn't actually execute the development agreement until the closing of the first phase of the project.
Okay. And then, so any kind of zoning cases would come separate? Then?
Yes.
Okay. And is this slated to be on their next council meeting? Or are we there yet?
Mayor,
We're just going to
Councilor.
provide direction.
We're just providing direction to, okay. I agree with Ryan. I'd like this to start tomorrow, so
Well, that's what we need, right?
Everything
We
takes
we
so
want to
long.
lay this out before we complete all the legal documents. so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just to kind of get direction. All right. I guess my other question, which obviously is down the road, but so are there current talks with ASU? And I mean, I know that we've talked a lot over the years about a desire to have some student housing, but like, we're in the middle of talks, or we're just hoping we're going to be in talks with them?
We've been talking with them. It's uncertain if or when it will get done, but we're hopeful. They're excited about Mesa. I don't speak for them, but we've seen what they've done in downtown Phoenix, and it could be really transformative. And so they've got all kinds of things to consider for their long-range planning. We just want to make it so that if it works out and we can get something done, it can work on the second phase.
Okay, because I mean, looking at the two maps, it looked like, I mean, a good chunk of phase one was taken out for potential ASU.
Well, we also made
development.
phase one wider, so phase one
wider.
actually overall is about the same size, but
Oh, okay.
because the southwest corner is the closest to their campus, that's the best spot for them.
Okay, that's exciting to me. Just I love the downtown Phoenix campus
Yeah.
and just the feel of it, and I think that really could fit in super well with this area and just what we're trying to do to this entire area. So
Yeah.
I'm excited about that.
Yeah.
And Mayor and Councilor Spilsbury, I can kind of give you some of our experience with ASU in this discussion over student housing. It is in very early stages. ASU is not prepared to bring student housing yet. They would want more of an academic footprint before they can bring student housing. But they are beginning to look at the overall student housing mix, and Mesa isn't. They're looking at Mesa playing a role in that. So the conversations with Culdesac in lining up with that has been a good thing for us.
Anyone else? Let's go
Sure.
for it.
I'll just make a comment. I really don't have any questions. I've always been impressed with Culdesac's mission and vision. You build for community, you build for people. You take into consideration climate and environment. I think that's important, and try to sort of ease those environmental pressures, heat, all of that. Local retail is important as well, and just activating an area and building with community in mind. I think all those things are great. They're important. I think they'll be successful here. We don't have a lot of that. And even my constituents are asking. In fact, out in D5, they said, can we have a cul-de-sac development out here? Yeah. So people recognize it's different, and they like it. And I think a lot of our questions are market-driven. The market will dictate how some of this rolls out. I agree with having the ownership in this first phase. I think that's great. Fingers crossed it does well. I think it will, based on what's important to what you stated as what's important to a community and a development for Culdesac, in addition to what we have said as the city of Mesa that's important. I think merging those two, it will be successful. But anyway, so I don't really have any questions. I'm happy, and I hope it moves forward as fast as it can.
Thanks. Julie.
Thank you for that. I appreciate those comments. I forgot I wanted to ask about the parking. So it's car light. So right now I'm seeing 1-to-1 for this first phase. So is that that's about what we're thinking, or?
So currently, we are structuring the development agreement to have a minimum requirement of 800 parking spaces, as was in the initial concept.
Oh, right, with the, okay.
We are discussing potential for increasing that, but Culdesac is committing in the first phase that there'll be at least one space per unit.
Okay. All right.
Anything else? Mr. Adams?
There we go. Well, good morning. I just have several, not many questions and a couple of comments, but I'd like to start off by saying I was pleasantly surprised when I toured the Tempe project. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I did like the look and feel and the vibe there, if you will. So that was a pleasant surprise for me. Just a few questions. There is a slide where you talk about reimbursement of, maybe that's the wrong word, of the construction sales tax. Can you monetize that? We talking $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, $4 million? What is that? Do we know?
Mayor, Councilmember Adams, unfortunately, we can't monetize it until we know how much construction sales tax or how much the construction will cost, but the value of construction. But what I can tell you is that would only be that portion of non-dedicated, the city's portion of non-dedicated sales tax. So
Understood.
of the 1.2% of the city's sales tax, it would about 60 cents of that is dedicated. So it would be about 60 cents of.
Okay.
We would bring that back.
Yes.
How you would see that. So this is just telling you the concept, but the council would actually be, we'd have
Okay.
to bring back to you the specific development agreement about how that construction sales tax would be applied to incentivize or to encourage some kind of unique retail or entertainment or experience. So you would see that connection in a future agreement.
But it'll be part of the agreement going forward.
It could be, yes. when we
Could
come
be,
back, yeah,
okay, so
yeah.
it's still a deal point.
Yep.
I'm just curious, I mean, surely somebody has some rough idea. It's either 10 million, 100 million?
What I can say is that in comparison to the reimbursement for public improvements using the proceeds of the land sale and also the purchase price, that it's a much less significant incentive.
Okay, and I'll wait for the facts later. I've never heard the term concierge zoning service, but that sounds intriguing. However, I would like to know, do we anticipate any zoning issues?
I don't
Should this
know.
go through planning and zoning
I do.
relatively easily?
I do imagine that, we will have a robust public involvement process.
Sure.
Culdesac is, has made clear that they want to be able to get out and start engaging with the public as soon as we have an agreement in place. So hopefully that will help with the public engagement. But from a staffing, a city staff perspective, we anticipate having I guess a very smooth zoning process and entitlement process, because our vision, city's vision, and Culdesac's vision is aligned. So it's more about how do we make that, how do we entitle that with zoning?
Okay, so we're just being proactive here. That's
Yes.
good. So we have about an 8% difference in appraisals. I'm assuming that independent appraisals were used by both parties.
Yes.
And my only comment there is I understand you hire 3 appraisers, you're going to get 3 numbers. My only comment there is I hope the city would not be the one that takes the greater part of the disadvantage in the negotiation. I can live with 50-50, but that's just a comment for you. Okay, and we're talking car light. So, and that's fine, but what do we do? How do we control, so we have 1-to-1, how do we control the streets from piling up with cars when people don't follow that rule? Is that going to be a CC&R? Ryan, have you thought about that? How are you going to keep people from parking too many cars in there?
You want to answer that one?
Well, I can.
Or there's a question.
I think both of us have an answer for this one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mayor, Councilmember Adams, there's a couple mechanisms. This falls within our downtown. It falls in the area that the Downtown Mesa Association is responsible for managing our parking. We don't have any parking restrictions in this area now because we don't have any parking demand. It is very much very reasonable, and we've been talking with Culdesac that is very reasonable that we would be able to expand DMA's role for parking enforcement and extend it over into the Culdesac area. We can apply time limitations for on-street parking. We can provide institute other mechanisms to be able to be able to enforce parking requirements, particularly for the neighborhoods of surrounding. Folks from transportation should plug their ears now because they don't want to hear this, but if it ever becomes an issue, there are things such as neighborhood parking programs where you can, Mr. Brady shaking his head too, I should stop talking. We don't want to go there, but if it ever gets that bad, you can, and it's what Tempe does around their campus to keep students out of the parking in the neighborhoods and just create a program where it's specific to that neighborhood.
Okay. The reason I ask is there is a neighborhood in District 1 that's dealing with a lot of on-street parking where people shouldn't park. And I'm just thinking, okay, if you're thinking about it and planning for it, I think that's good. Last question I had was, Ryan, you mentioned renewal rates at Tempe in the 80% range, I think. How does that compare to market? Is that high, low? Is that good?
Our renewal rates are better than market, but they're not substantially different. Typical market renewal rates are something like 50%.
Okay, all right. Okay. Thank you, Mayor. That's all I have.
Anyone else?
A question and
Mr. Reddy.
same like Councilmember Adams, very impressed on the Tempe cul-de-sac and really the vibe there is really interesting, and just the mix of the retail and how it works with the people that live there. I think it's a neat concept. I know there is various different outreach meetings and stakeholder meetings, and maybe Councilmember Duff, you can chime into like the neighborhoods and stakeholders around there. I know we've had various different iterations of outreach based on the different ideas that have come on over the last several years, but any particular insights with this plan or conversations that maybe Jeff and Councilmember Duff that you've heard? I'll ask that.
Mayor, Councilmember Heredia, surprisingly, or not surprisingly, I should say, time has passed very fast since we did our last outreach effort, the Transform 17 outreach. It is from that Transform 17 outreach and the significant amount of public input that we had that we created the guiding principles that we used to establish the RFP that Culdesac responded to and we selected from. Now that goes back to October of 2023. We have not had any additional public outreach or significant public outreach since that point. We are looking forward to moving forward with Culdesac so that they can again initiate their public outreach efforts.
Sure.
I'll just go back, since I've been following this piece of property from before I was on council, in which we started a public outreach in order to find out what kind of development the community would support and its height restrictions, what kind of elements and stuff like that. And the basis, just the shell of that has been used in order to solicit for this RFP in which Culdesac was selected. Many people know, because of the articles and discussion around the area, that Culdesac is the proposed development, and it's been very positive. The only thing is, why is it so slow? So I haven't had any pushback. I think it is really a strong project, and I think that's why we selected Culdesac for that part of our downtown, to really activate it as a catalyst and being connected into downtown. So it has that vibe. We need that vibe to be part of the whole entirety instead of just another apartment complex. And because it has a very community forward programming and the way it's designed and developed, and being able to have downtown connecting that is really going to be a catalyst for other development, I think, around it. So I think it's a very strong development to being a major piece of downtown and what we want downtown to be and what people, I believe, is that vibe, the reason they come downtown. And I guess downtown is getting a vibe. I heard this from my hairdresser yesterday. Because a couple of years ago, I was like, I don't know, I work here, but I don't really hang out here. And then he's telling, yesterday, he's like, it has a vibe. Oh my gosh, on Saturday night, we just want, but you got to keep it local. You got to keep it real. You got to keep it authentic. Don't be, and so I'm glad it's getting a vibe. But this, and Culdesac really is a great partner in continuing the element that many people are falling in love with right now, and providing some housing options, because that's the other complaint I get all the time, especially on for sale units and students wanting to be here and ASU professors and such. Empty nesters, we know quite a few who are looking for spaces in order that we want to be part of a community and get rid of the large single family environment in which they live, wanting to downsize. So I think it's really stepping into the future of a lot of multimodal type environment that we need to develop for downtown, so we remain connected and people forward. So I don't have any concerns as far, I'm not feeling any pressure from anyone in the community. There was some pressure in the last one about affordable housing being involved, but I think this development, because of the way it's designed, keeps it affordable without it being affordable, because we're not dedicating so much space to cars and have to have this free housing for cars priced into the units. And being able to live car light or without a car certainly makes it more affordable way to live. That's why we need to lean harder into multimodal options for everybody to reach it and to live and work. So that was a long answer.
Thank you. Yeah, no.
Vice Mayor, anything? You good?
Yeah, good.
Okay, so, I'm been around a long time, and I feel like we're putting jumper cables on a project to get it restarted again. So I look forward to moving forward with this, and especially the neighborhood outreach and get their input. One thing, I think putting guardrails on these projects to help make sure there's continuity, protecting the city's assets before we sell them, and make sure all the timelines are followed through. I think that's extremely important. I'm looking at, I know staff has taken us on some tours, and I appreciate that, but I think that it's important that we have quality developments that are long-lasting effects in our community, because you are right next door to a historic district, and I think the continuity in that and how that blends into the new development. So whatever the design phases, phase 1 and 2 and 3 blend out, hopefully there's continuity in that so it stands out as a unique area in Mesa. With that, I still have a concern about parking, because people are still driving the community. I know we differ on council on that, but I don't see anything, any people not driving. I see a lot of 2 vehicles and things. So I think that keep that in consideration, Ryan, as you move forward with your project. But I don't want to overflow in their streets and having to manage that. I think that's not respectful. But with that, I think it's just direction. I'm hearing from council that we're going to give you direction to move forward. Your council good with that? All right, thank you. Any last comments?
Well, Mayor, with council's direction, we anticipate being able to finalize our negotiations on the purchase and development agreement and have it back to you this spring. With that meeting. Well, I don't think you have a meeting tomorrow, but.
Spring ends early in Mesa. By April it's considered summer.
It feels like spring already.
We are very close. We really needed to have this discussion to make sure that we were going down the path the council is supportive of. But we'd anticipate that Culdesac will sign that purchase agreement as soon as council approves it, and that will get kicked off into the zoning entitlements right away.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Looking forward. Thanks for your time.
Okay, item 1B is to hear a presentation on general, governmental and utility fund forecasts. Thank you, Brian, and your team coming forward. Did we lose anybody? Just Scott. All right, now we'll transition from development to money, I guess. Forecasts.
Good morning, Mayor, Council. My name is Brian Ritchell. I'm the Office of Management and Budget Director. Along with me is Chris Olby. He's the Office of Management and Budget Deputy Director. So this we'll be going over the financial forecast of the major funds that we forecast, which is the General Governmental Fund and the Utility Fund, and kind of going over the principles and the outlook of that fund that we're seeing throughout the next 5 years. So with this, what we do typically is periodically, and I know Council kind of looks at this too, is the homeowner comparison. And we take that into consideration when we're looking at the forecast, looking at the budget, looking at utility rates, things like that. So what I wanted to do is go through and see, first slide is what's included in that homeowner comparison. And what we take a look at is what is a typical resident, what are they paying for full service to live in the city of Mesa? So one of the things that we look at is primary property tax and secondary property tax. The city of Mesa, along with one other municipality, does not have a primary, so we have the secondary property tax. We also take a look at city sales tax. And what we do is we take there's a basket of goods that we take from economic software, and we apply the city sales tax and what a typical resident would be paying for those goods. We also take a look at the 3 major utilities that most municipalities serve, which is solid waste, water, and wastewater. And what we do is we take those and combine them into a chart, which we have as the homeowner comparison. And so this homeowner comparison focuses on fiscal year 24-25, the annual cost comparison. And included in here, as you'll see a few little things, what we do is we combine all of those. One of the things that we have included is you'll see a little asterisk next to Phoenix. Phoenix is looking, they will be deciding in a couple of weeks on looking to raise their sales tax by 0.5%, so 50%. So that is actually what is included. We have an asterisk because it's just estimated. So if they did do that, this is where the city of Phoenix would fall. The city of Tempe has also put out their notice of intent for their utility rates. So we've included that because once they do the notice of intent, then they're looking to, as you're aware, the utilities will soon be adopted and they can't go lower. They can, unless they want to redo their notice of intent. So we've included those rate adjustments. Also in there, as you'll see at the top, is the town of Gilbert. The town of Gilbert now they have approved a 0.5-cent sales tax, which went into effect January 1. So they are now equal to the city of Mesa at 2% for the city, or 8.3 total. They have also just approved a 95% increase for their wastewater. So their wastewater went from about $32 a month to $62 a month. So that is included in here. The town of Gilbert used to be where we are now currently. As you see, we have dropped to the 3rd most affordable comparison in this chart. So with all of those adjustments, this does include the rate adjustments that the council just approved in November. And so with that, we have dropped a little bit below because a lot of the other municipalities are now trying to catch up, and where we have been at, with the utility rates, we kind of do the smoothing. Some of them are doing 14, 15, 50%, now town of Gilbert 95%. So this is just trying to give you a gauge of what we look at when we're looking at the forecast and wanting to compare living in the city of Mesa compared to living in another town or city within the valley.
So, Mayor and Council, you've heard me use this. We use this quite often in our conversations. I know when we had quite a robust conversation with some of our community members, we kept pointing this out, and we will always use this as our benchmark. There is no other better way to calculate how much it costs, what local government cost is, than really this comparison. And here's what's remarkable. That's $2,200 for a Mesa resident to receive all, that's the part they pay to the city. Now, what's not included in this for all the cities is the urban shared revenues, the vehicle license tax, and what else am I missing, Chris?
State shared sales tax.
Yeah, so the state, so all of that, but that's apportioned out by population, right? So it's not going to change. That's just per capita, right? The state makes that allocation based on the census. So it's equal for all cities based on their population. So we don't include that. But even if you did, that number we think is another maybe $2,000 on top of what individuals are paying us. Chris, do you have that number?
$1,300.
$1,300. Okay. So here's my point. $2,200 plus the $1,300 for less than $4,000 a year. You get 24-hour public safety services who will respond within minutes. You get high-quality water, wastewater services, twice a week garbage pickup, and the list goes on and on and on. There's very few things, and considering all the inflation and all the things that are taking place, that for that much money, you can receive all those services that make an impact in your life. So whether it's Mesa at the third lowest or any of these other cities, I think it's just a remarkable benefit. And yet there are many people who believe it's extraordinarily burdensome. But I think when you consider the services that are being rendered and what people receive, comparing to what you pay for your mortgage, what you pay for your car, what you pay for food, this is still very reasonable, I think, cost for a quality of life. So again, we've said this over and over again. We believe Mesa is a true good value for our residents. For the average, this is the average homeowner, right? Someone could own a home that has as much, it could be twice as much. Obviously, you're going to hear from constituents say, "Well, I pay a lot more than that." They could, based on their secondary property tax. But this is the average, right? We try to fit, so it's the same for all cities, right? And we get it. For some, it could be quite a bit more, and some for a little bit less. But we try to hit that average, so it's going to hit the majority of our residents. And it's a benchmark, right? It's a number, but it's also a comparison of how we're doing versus other cities. And frankly, there really isn't a huge difference between us or Scottsdale and even Gilbert. I mean, yes, there's a number there, $500, whatever it is, but that's not significant, right? When you consider all of the costs that are going into the city. So I just want to make a point. As individuals come and make remarks about the cost of services in the city of Mesa in comparison to other cities, this is the benchmark we will always use. We're not going to do a division of per capita of other things because this kind of normalizes the comparison, and this is what individual residents are actually paying, right? It's not taking a budget number that includes things like regional wastewater treatment plants and regional public safety facilities that sometimes we carry that other cities don't, but we eventually get reimbursed for it. This is really trying to take it down to literally to the nuts and bolts of what people actually receive in their local community with these. And that's why we wanted to give you an explanation of what's included in there. So I think this shows that Mesa is trying to be very responsible with the dollars that we have and trying to provide a very good value for those services.
Thank you, Chris. Mr. Adams?
Thanks, Chris. That's great information. I'm just curious. So is this chart based on the total number of customers receiving water, wastewater, and so forth, divided by the total expenditure? How do we arrive at this average
Go
number?
ahead, Chris. You explain.
Sure. Mayor and Councilmember Adams, for water and wastewater, we follow our rate schedule. So we look at the median usage for customers by month. So typically it's 6,000 gallons per month. So we take that 6,000 gallons against our rate schedule, and that determines the amounts in here. Wastewater charges are based off of the winter water average. So we look at the homeowner's, median usage and then apply that.
So what they're actually paying, the average homeowner is actually paying. We do not take a division of per capita because there are wastewater and water treatment plants that is on the city of Mesa's books, but are shared regional facilities that we're getting reimbursed by those other communities. But if you just took the expenditure line and divided that by Mesa, it's probably going to be higher. But what they're not seeing is that it's a regional facility. It's the Greenfield wastewater treatment plant. And yet what they don't see is the revenues coming to reimburse us for that. So that's not the best way to calculate it. What this is the actual cost for an average resident in their local community. So it kind of takes all those other variables out and just says, how much are we charging for all of these services? And then we try to create a average that we can then apply across all the other cities.
Okay, I don't doubt for a moment the accuracy of the chart. The questions will always come on something like this. Well, is it apples to apples, so forth?
Absolutely.
So my question is based, I just want to understand the source information, so thank you. Appreciate it.
No, it's a great question because you will still hear residents, and they'll show up to the council, well, City of Mesa per capita is so much more than Gilbert. Yeah, but that's an oversimplification of an approach that doesn't understand that there are lots of projects, especially in Mesa, because we're the largest city in the East Valley, that we provide services and facilities that other cities utilize, but they also pay us back. But if you're only doing an expenditure calculation per capita, you're not going to see that. So what we said is, no, what does the actual homeowner pay if I lived in Mesa or Gilbert trying to draw that same basket of goods, if you want, or services, and do that comparison? Because ultimately, that's what we're all paying. That's what the average homeowner is paying to live in those communities, not what the gross budget is divided by population.
I just
Mayor-
want,
go ahead.
oh, go ahead.
So the average of Mesa and then used in each city, not their average user. It's our average user and then calculated based on their costs, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Mayor, Councilmember Goforth. We look at the Mesa median of 6,000 gallons, and we apply that to every other city in this comparison as if, if I use 6,000 gallons in Gilbert, Tucson, Glendale, it's the same.
So our median is 6,000.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know that we've ever, and it's an interesting question. I don't know if we've ever looked and said, well, do they use more in Scottsdale because they have bigger yards? So we just tried to normalize it, say for Mesa, if you were a person in Mesa and you live in these other communities and using the same amount of water or wastewater, water services, and because after that, everything, it's hard to well, is it different police services or fire services? And
Yeah.
so we just try to normalize it as best we could to get that apples to apples comparison.
I just want to go back.
I was just wondering if their homeowner comparisons would look the same then.
The only thing that may be different is they may use their 6,000 gallons could be more or less than that. I don't know what that
their
looks like.
average.
You think about if you have bigger lots with more outdoor usage, then maybe it's up. And we're
More
such a big,
families.
what's that?
More families, there's communities.
More
that
families.
have more people.
But
than-
again, on a per gallon basis, we're just trying to normally say, okay, in Mesa, here's what the average homeowner. Now, eventually you apply that to their rate, right? So we take our 6,000 gallons usage and just said, if you lived in another community, assuming you're going to kind of have the same family size, that doesn't change, and your usage would be about the same. How much would you be paying in these other communities? We're just trying to figure out a way to normalize it as best as possible. Say if you're a Mesa resident, but you were living these other communities for the same amount of consumption of services, what would that look like? So that's what this is. And it is fair too, because we use the secondary property tax, right? And we have to look at that across other values across other cities. But that's how we.
And Mayor, Council Member Spilsbury, Another thing to take a look at too is when we do that is in, say, with the city sales tax. The City of Mesa does not have a food tax, but other municipalities do. So that goes into our calculation also, is that, okay, if you're living in Mesa, your sales tax, what you pay may be less because we don't have a food tax, where in Gilbert or Tempe or Chandler, where they do have a food tax, you'd be paying a little bit more because you'd probably be shopping in those areas. So it's the same with that, and same with primary property tax. The town of Gilbert, and we don't have a primary property tax, but others do, so they would be paying that. So that's kind of how we would say, okay, if we picked up this household and put it into Gilbert, Chandler, Tucson, this is what they would be paying at those rates.
Okay, I just wanted to add, you brought up city sales tax, and the other municipalities have raised their city sales tax by council decision. But in Mesa, we cannot do that. We have to have it voter approved. So I want to differentiate. There is a difference between us and them about just raising taxes to meet your obligations on your budget. Brian, go ahead.
I'm sorry, can I ask one more question? So on that, but you're talking about the total tax. So even if they have a food tax, it doesn't, their total sales tax may be lower than Mesa's. You're not.
Their rate?
Their rate.
Oh,
Sorry.
yeah.
Yeah, you're not
We look at it as a
necessarily.
basket of goods.
Okay.
Looking at the
I mean,
basket,
you
yes.
mentioned the food, but that's not added on top of, I mean, that's calculated within the rate, and it doesn't necessarily mean.
It's calculated on how much they would pay in a year for their sales tax.
For sales tax.
Yeah.
Right.
Because we look at basket of goods, and that where do we pull that from?
Mayor, Councilmember Goforth.
Okay.
For the sales tax, we look at the Bureau of Labor Statistics Consumer Expenditure Survey. And so the BLS will survey a number of homes in the Phoenix MSA, and they'll determine how much a household spends on, food and gas and other items. And so we apply that to all cities with the sales tax rates. So a good example of this is Gilbert has now the same 2% sales tax rate as us, but they tax groceries. And so if you look at the Gilbert, the dark green bar, you can see that their bar is a little bit bigger than our dark green bar, because the consumer expenditure survey says, okay, a household spends this much on groceries. In Gilbert, that's going to be taxed. In Mesa, it's not.
Okay, thank you.
This is no doubt a daunting task to try to estimate all these things or come up with some baseline. What would be really helpful for me, in addition to this, is if we had a chart that showed by the same comparison of municipalities what the rate per 1,000 gallons for water, wastewater, if that's available, in the same form of comparison.
We have that in your back.
Yeah, Mayor, Councilmember Adams. So we include that in the rates for each of the cities. So depending on the rate structure for each city, it depending on where that 6,000 gallons falls, maybe that's tier 1, maybe that's tier 2 for various cities. Each city has a different water rate structure. So, some say tier 1 is between 0 and 10,000 gallons or more or less. And so we look at each of those rate structures for each city.
Okay.
And we take that baseline usage of 6,000 gallons per customer and apply that to each city's rate
So we're
structure.
doing what you're asking, but we pick a specific number that's related to our average.
range.
Because
Okay.
it keeps, like Chris is saying, you may have another city that the higher tier kicks in maybe lower than ours or higher than ours.
I see.
And so that's why we had to pick a number that we said is the average of Mesa, and then we just apply that against every other rate. Again, it's this imagining of taking a average Mesa homeowner and plopping them in these other communities, and they're consuming the same amount of water and everything, and then how much would that cost? That's the best we could get to.
I was afraid you were going to tell me that each city was different, and apparently they are.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes, quite
All right.
a bit, yeah. And
Okay.
a lot of that, to our benefit, is a lot of these cities are having to pay a very strong premium on their water supply.
Yes.
And now they're having to really be very aggressive in building that out. Mesa, historically, even though we're spending some of our biggest projects on that, our water portfolio and the investment that Mesa has made over decades really helps us manage those costs down quite a bit.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate the detail. Ms. Spilsbury.
Just as a follow-up to Rich's point, so that's why you can't just stick like a number or a rate or a percentage on those colors, because it's much more complicated than a number that matches for every city.
Yes, Mayor, Councilmember Spilsbury, correct. It's because each municipality has different rates for different gallons used, and even with wastewater, their rates are different with that, to where we have our wastewater average, then we apply it as a flat amount. Some of them do usage, some of them do the same. So that's what we do is the OMB staff does a great job of, they'll take the 6,000, the average of what a resident uses, but then they'll go to each rate book for each city and town and then apply that and then put it into the spreadsheet so we can calculate it.
Someone had reached out to me, like asking, well, what's the Mesa versus Gilbert? And I was researching both of the websites to see like what a general person would go on and see. And there was nothing even comparable that was like, oh, this is obviously the same in Mesa and Gilbert. Like, it was extremely complicated to try to figure out like what's the rate increase compared to this rate increase, because it's just, they do it so differently.
What we could share with you, because we have this in our backup, is say, for the average homeowner in Mesa, I mean, you can see it here, but we could show you a water comparison. Like, okay, for 6,000 gallons in Mesa, you pay this much, and here's how much you pay in the other communities.
Okay.
For wastewater, and we have to pick a number, right? We have to pick the number.
Okay.
And then we use that number, as Brian says, and then we take the 6,000 and we go, okay, if I'm in Gilbert, and I'm using 6,000, here's how much it would cost me if I'm, or Tucson or Tempe, whatever. That's how, we have to pick a number, and so we pick the average of a Mesa resident.
And Mayor and Council, this is one spreadsheet of our homeowner comparison, as I think you guys are aware of. We have it online, and it's called the homeowner, the Valley comparison, Valley City comparison. And in the back of that is a kind of spreadsheet form of each municipality and what it would cost. The number of, if you use 6,000 for water, it's this much. So it's not in a graphical form, it's in the number. So it's part of that packet that's
So it is online and accessible.
Yeah, I think that's important. We have a lot of
Yes.
smart people here in the city of Mesa, and they're going to ask about the methodology and how we can't, just showing them this is not enough
But online,
information.
you can find that.
Online,
You can
yes,
get
the whole-
that.
Great.
yeah, the whole packet is online.
Thank you.
It's fairly easy to find.
Yes.
Say it again, what would be?
It's under, if you go on the website and up on the left-hand corner, there's the drop-down box. If you go under the government, then Office of Management and Budget, and if you scroll down a little bit, it'll have Valley City comparison and Valley City and homeowner comparison. You click on that, and then it'll pop up the whole thing.
Okay, so not underwater necessarily.
Yeah, no, this is
No, this is
budget.
under the
Not
Office of
underwater,
Management
but
and Budget.
under Office of, okay. Oh, perfect.
Mr. Heredia.
I think just real quick comment to Chris's point. I think in my 7+ years on council, I think we've always strived to be in the middle or bottom range of this graph, like the homeowner comparison, and then that's significant, right? Like our strategies when we do increases because of the costs increasing over time, we always strive to be in the middle, bottom ranges of this comparison that highlights what we're looking at for homeowners, right? And I think that's an important aspect. And you mentioned, recently Gilbert had a 95% increase in their wastewater, you mentioned. I don't think in my 7+ years, we even gotten anywhere close or even to an increase like that, right? And so that's an important aspect too, because folks try to compare us to like Gilbert or other municipalities nearby, but the context when you look at some of this data and then how we try to lessen the impact as best as we can, given all the price increases we're facing, is a job that I think is an important aspect to how we smooth out just the principles that we have, smoothing out throughout the years, not having a 95% increase like Gilbert has, instituted. So that's something that I think hits the pocketbooks like immediately, right? It gets a shock. And what we try to do is even out so it doesn't have that type of shock piece. And that's always been, I think, an important aspect to, and sometimes gets lost in the shuffle of people trying to pinpoint, data and saying that Mesa it costs more. But when you look at the context and this and the work that we've done over time is not to have that shock as we encounter these difficulties on price increases. So just that comment there.
Yeah, and thank you, Councilmember and Mayor and Councilmember Heredia. I spoke with the officials at Gilbert, and the reason they had to they kind of were backed up, they had to make this decision. And one of the reasons was given is because they didn't do any rate increases for the prior several years, right? And so they had to make it all up in 1 year. And it was painful, but they kind of had put themselves in no choice. As you said, our philosophy has not been that. Now, it does make it a little bit more of a annual challenge and difficult conversation, I know, for the council and the community, because we're always every year talking about a small increment. But we think that's a better choice than hitting with a $30 increase in 1 year. And just real quickly, I just typed in Google Mesa Valley City comparison. It takes you right to the site. Perfect. Thank you.
Vice Mayor.
Real briefly, we had a resident come up and make a comment last meeting about this comparison in community facilities districts. There's 2, I believe, in the city, and how those roll in. I also know that at least Scottsdale has one, probably a couple others. That's not included in
right.
this?
And Mayor and Councilmember, we are not going to include those because we don't include HOA fees and, and you choose, what we always remind people is you chose to go into that community. You signed the documents.
Yeah. You did that, didn't you?
I did that too. I'm just
so we've made it very clear that's not, while the council sits as the, CFD board?
Governing body.
Governing body, they make those decisions. A lot of us live in other HOAs. We don't pay that much, but we pay an amount, but we don't have any way of figuring that out.
So basically,
we are not including that. This is
So basically, the CFDs, like HOAs and some other things, is each community is going to be different within that city, and that makes it impossible to add to that. So you have to add that. Well, I know one of those CFDs we're no longer selling bonds for. We've closed that out, and we have just one more to maybe consider shutting down. Thank you.
Well, great. I think this comparison works really well for a snapshot of what we're doing in the city, and I look forward to further financial forecasting coming up.
So yes, Mayor and City Council. No, we're not done. Yes, Mayor and Council.
That was number 4.
As Councilmember Heredia mentioned, we do look at this comparison and we try to stay within the middle to the bottom third of that, but also to be able to provide the services, the high level of services that we are able to provide and still be able to be down there. On the next slide, Chris will start going over kind of what the financial forecast that we use to be able to do that.
Yeah, so I'll walk through the next couple slides, the financial forecasting process. So first we'll start looking at the current expenses and revenues that we're receiving and paying. And then we'll look at historical trends as well to see how those have been tracking in recent years. Any forecast, we look at multiple years. We provide multi-year forecasts to council, which allows for an evaluation of the financial sustainability of various programs and services. We include future needs, so what we call life cycle items, which would be purchases that we make not every year, but maybe once every 3 to 5 years. We make sure that we include those in the forecast, as well as operations and maintenance related to capital projects. We'll look at the schedule for various projects and see when the operations and maintenance needs to come online, include that. And then last year is the city's financial policy called for the use of ongoing revenues for ongoing expenditures, so we don't want an ongoing program being funded by just a one-time revenue. Digging more into the revenue side, within OMB, we have a statistical software program where we evaluate the correlation between economic trends and the city's revenue sources. Where we can, we collaborate with departments on revenue forecasts. So a good example of this is the utility revenues. We work very closely with the departments as they understand their rate structures. Relevant economic indicators that we look at: population and account growth, wages, unemployment, other macroeconomic data. And then we also include Mesa-specific factors. So if there's some economic development activity, if there's a large utility customer that's coming online, or if there's legislative changes that affect Mesa specifically, we will also include those in the forecast if we know of them. On the expenditure side, we look by expenditure category. So first is going to be the personal services. And what we do is we go through each line item of the personal services. So pension rates, medical premiums, salaries, and we'll forecast each of those individually and then roll those up into the personal services forecast as a whole. For other services and commodities, we have large specialty contracts that we handle separately. For general expenditures, we forecast those at the Consumer Price Index or the CPI. For those large specialty contracts, some examples here, we have a lot of these in the utilities. So water commodity purchases, chemicals at the treatment plants, solid waste tipping fees. Each of these are large contract items within the utilities, and we collaborate with the departments to forecast those appropriately. And then last on here is capital. So the majority of expenditures are related to construction projects or vehicle purchases. We do have a multi-year plan. Our CIP process is concurrent with the budget process, and any debt service payments related to any capital projects we also include in our forecasts. So I'll turn it back to Brian to go into the general governmental funds.
So just to highlight quickly, most of you have seen this before. Here's our general governmental fund financial principles. We have the 5 principles of balancing the net sources and uses throughout the forecast. Also a 10 to 15% reserve over the 5-year forecast period, but also sustainability of programs and services. And then keeping wages and benefits comparative to other municipalities around the valley. And then also investment in capital assets and life cycle. So those are the 5 principles that we like to follow when we're doing the forecast. So what I want to do is transition over to kind of the current outlook that we're seeing for revenue pressures of the current outlook. Most of you know we lost the residential rental sales tax, which is roughly for this general governmental fund is just over $18 million annually, and then kind of grows throughout the forecast. They also implemented the state flat tax, which with that, we'll lose some revenue on the calculation that they did. And then also, we're seeing slight to no growth in our city sales and state sales tax. So those are kind of the revenue pressures that we're seeing on the forecast. With that, with those revenue losses, we're also seeing significant expenditure pressures. And what I'd like to do is ask Assistant City Manager, or soon-to-be City Manager, Scott Butler, to come up and kind of talk about one of the bigger ones, which is the compensation and benefits. The city just went through a compensation and benefit benchmark, and he'd talk about the kind of the public safety side of it.
Great, thank you, Brian. Mayor, Council, good morning. It's a good news, bad news situation. The good news is we completed our benchmarking survey that we were committed to this year for public safety. And the good news is that it's been a priority of this council and of city management to make sure that our public safety officials, both in police and fire, I should say personnel in police and fire, are compensated adequately and fairly along with our regional peers. That's so important for recruitment and for retention, and to make sure, certainly that we are recognizing the important role of public safety in our community, and that we're paying our employees adequately. So as we've completed that, it showed that we were in just a 2-year span, sizably under market from where some of our peer cities have gone. So because of that, we'll be making adjustments that Mr. Brady and Brian have put into our budget as we go through this. But it does carry a substantial financial impact to the city. So in order to bring us up to speed and relative to the market of our peers, the impact for both the adjustments to police and fire sworn personnel that are subject to our MOU agreement that we have is about $23 million. So that will be an ongoing cost that Brian and Chris have to add into our budget. So that's a compounding cost over time, and that's just to bring us to market. And that is just for our sworn personnel that in police and fire. So you can see, unfortunately, we all hear about it and maybe read about in the community and our neighboring communities, just the aggressive nature that departments have shown to try to use compensation as a tool to recruit and retain their employees is certainly turned, we refer to, and I think it's fair to say it's an arms race right now on public safety salaries. And frankly, I don't know how it's sustainable over the long term for any of these communities, but we know the importance, and we agree with the importance that we have to be adequately compensated in the market. So we have to make those adjustments in order to do that, knowing the importance of public safety in our community. So so that was certainly the bad news, is that that financial impact is going to have a dramatic impact on our ability to deliver services in other ways when this is taking up such a huge portion of our budget.
So Scott, how often under the MOU are we required to benchmark?
We, per the MOU, we agreed that after 2 years, and we're ending up year 2 of the MOU, that will, year 2 ends on June 30th and year 3 starts July 1, that we would do a benchmarking this spring, and then those benchmarking rates would go into effect on July 1.
And it's just a benchmark of salary only? Only salary?
It is of salary, that is correct. And Mayor and Councilmember Goforth, absolutely. There are, I mean, we all know.
Begs the question as to why, I mean, why offer lifetime benefit, right, if it doesn't count towards somebody's overall benefit, right, and package, right? So, I mean, at 23 million, maybe we pull back on some of those other benefits to compensate for that additional 23 million. Have we discussed any of that?
Well, Mayor, Councilmember Goforth, I will say the 23 million and staying competitive in wages is just to keep us on par with the market. What some of these other benefits, at least what I hear as I'm talking to officers and others out in the field, is that's what separates us to make us an employer of choice. If everyone is being paid roughly the same, what are those things that separate the city of Mesa? Especially, we are a large, complex organization, right? Our men and women, both in police and fire, have more complex assignments sometimes than what they could potentially see in a neighboring community that maybe has less calls for service or doesn't have the same medical needs that maybe we see throughout a city of our size and our scale. And so there's
I think that's why we offer the added benefit, right? Maybe to compensate for those types of things,
yeah,
right?
Absolutely, Mayor and Councilman. And again, this is obviously a policy decision, but just what I hear is the fact of, you could go to a different department and you may not have to work quite as hard because it's less calls for service or a little quieter in certain regards. But in Mesa, folks who want to be here, they understand that comes along with the assignment, and that comes along with the nature of our city. And so we look, in addition to salary, which we want to be competitive, right? We don't say, we never go in saying we're going to be the top paid organization.
So does this assume? This doesn't even assume being the top paid.
We will not be the top paid, I don't believe, in any of the categories. We're in the top tier. We're in the top 3.
We're right there. So, and Council Goforth, those are great questions. Let me just add, this is just for the benchmarking. Then on top of that, there's another 5% for the step pay. So you are absolutely right, and you're going to see it here in a minute. We just want to lay this groundwork because we're not backing off of this part of it. But as I told the police department last night in a presentation I made to their staff is something has to give. Now, if we can be, we're going to be competitive on pay and benefits, but something has to give. And you can't make up this amount of money when all the other departments are also cutting back. You can't just say, well, don't touch public safety. What that means is you are having to make choices to drastically reduce the services outside of public safety. What we believe is, and the challenge we've presented to both police and fire is, you have got to help us find the savings somewhere else, whether that's overtime, whether that's specialty assignments. We need to keep the core services, but there may be things that we would like to do, but we just can't afford to do in services. And it's not that we don't want to, it's not, and public safety will still be by far the greatest priority in the city. It's just that the unit cost to provide that service just keeps escalating. You know, I mean, how many, as much as inflation has gone up, to get a 10 to 17% pay raise in 2 years, I mean, it just shows you what this market is. It's just, it's just kind of out of control, frankly. But we have to play in that game, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But it is not sustainable because you heard Brian say our revenues are not growing, but maybe if we get 3% this year, we're going to be excited. And so it's a math problem, right? If expenses, salaries, benefits are the greatest expense, the biggest portion of our budget. If that's going up by, let's just use the word 10%, it's going up more than that, and revenues are only at 3%, it becomes a math problem. The good news is, I'm going to jump ahead because we're all kind of there. We're starting off in a good place financially.
To weather it.
For a period of time, right?
Yeah.
When I started this conversation with you all months ago, I was thinking, oh, we can absorb, slow down the economy, and the sales tax elimination, we'll need to make some cuts, and we're doing that right now. We can absorb that because we have 3 to 4 years, 5 years to make that happen. This number pushes us up against 2 years, right? So the good news, we start from a point, you know, if we were just at a modest financial position, this would be much more urgent. Now we're going back to public safety and saying, you got to help us make up this difference in addition to the cuts you have.
Yeah. I mean, as you say, we have to be competitive. Public safety is #1 service we provide for sure, but I'm glad to hear that they will be a part of the process to absorb some of that. Thanks.
Okay. Mr. Butler, are you done?
I am. Thank you, Mayor.
Great news.
Yeah. You don't want to hear more about it.
Well, by the way, congratulations on your appointment.
So Mayor and Council, so to get back to that, it is a significant expense pressure because, as the city manager Brady indicated, some sworn or may be getting up to a 17% salary increase in July, because they'll get that benchmark, they'll move up, but then they're also, if they're eligible for the 5% on top of that in July. So you could have a significant pay increase for some of those. Also, what we're doing, the city is going through, is a benchmark for the rest of the city for all the non-sworn
Brian, let me ask you a
positions.
question then on the benchmarking 23 mil per year. Does that include the 5% for sworn step pay increase? It does not.
So, no, it does not.
What is that number then?
That's the 5% down.
No, I get that, but it costs.
Oh, how much? Oh,
like in
no.
millions or hundreds of thousands?
I think it's about 1.5 million.
Okay.
But we're calculating, because as some are topped out, they won't
Correct.
get that. So
Right.
I think it's around, I could be misquote, but I think it's around 50% is topped out, 50% isn't. So it's around there. So it's about, I think, $1.5 to $2 million.
So just real quickly, I just have to make this, because you're going to hear from your non-sworn personnel. They're going through benchmarking also, right? We're doing market, we do it for them also, because we have to keep and retain mechanics. I was with mechanics last night, talking with them about how critical they are. So we have to be competitive in that area. So when we do the benchmarking for them, it adjusts the range. It tells us where we're going to, the bottom of the range is, where they start, and where the top of the range is. But despite the fact that range may move up 5%, 6% in any one time period in 2 years, the most that they will get is what is set aside in the step pay, right? Unless they're below the range, I guess. But anybody else will only get either that 3 to 4%. In public safety, they get the benchmark increase plus the step pay. No other employees, and I reminded public safety this, no other employees get those kind of rate increases. The most they'll get is what is available for the step pay, even if their range, their pay benchmark goes up by 6 or 7, 8%, they'll be capped at that 3 to 4%, whatever we decide. So public safety gets a very generous portion of consideration in this market analysis. It's not just the fact that their range went up, they get that increase plus the step pay.
Okay.
So can I ask, sorry, I forgot to ask you, Mr. Butler, who are the peer cities for the benchmark?
Mayor and Councilmember Goforth, our peer cities are established by HR, and we keep that consistently through both our sworn and our civilian ranks. So we benchmark against Chandler, Glendale, Phoenix, Scottsdale, and Tempe.
How do you choose those?
Yeah.
The size of cities.
Oh, literally population.
It's the best. Yeah, it's just kind of, and I think all the employee groups have agreed to it. I mean, it's, because theoretically, although this very rarely ever happens, that someone moves from one department to another, they may come from another state, because it's all, well, they're competitive, we're gonna lose people. Where you lose people is at the recruitment stage. Rarely do you lose, you might lose a few later on, but the theory is that's the market, where someone's saying, hey, I want to, because Phoenix is paying more, I'm going to go from here to Phoenix, or I could go to Tempe, because it's kind of in this area. And it's departments that are of the size and sophistication similarly. It's hard, right? Because, even for Phoenix, right, they're at $1.5 million or $1.6 million, whatever, 8, whatever they are. And even to say, well, compared to Mesa, which were a third of their size. Yeah. But then you go down to Tempe's and Glendale. So it's just the best comparison for this area in the metropolitan area that everybody considers kind of the competitive market.
Okay.
Because they're the ones they run into at an event. So, how much you get?
And it's within a market.
Yeah,
right?
it's within
the
the
cost
market.
of living is the same. If you go to Seattle, that would be an unfair comparison.
Right. That's fair, yeah.
And Mayor, Vice Mayor, that's exactly why Tucson, for example, isn't included. It's just a different market. And so even though they're very similar in size and they're in Arizona, it's just a different market. So we don't benchmark different. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Adams, do you have a question?
Just a couple of comments to make before I forget them. There's a cost to replace a tenured employee when they leave. And I think we're all aware of that, but I'm well aware of it in my business. And Mr. Brady just said we're not losing a lot of tenured folks. It's at the recruitment stage, so that's good to know. But there is a cost in replacing a qualified employee, whether they're sworn or whether they're in the water department or whatever. So and that's an argument I make towards making sure that whether it's my business or the city, that we're competitive in the marketplace. The other comment I have is I'm assuming, and this is not a comment directed at public safety, it's a comment directed at the overall workforce. I'm assuming everybody on the payroll is essential. If they're not, there's a place that we can save some money. So just a comment.
So, yeah, and Mayor and Council, to get back to the Mayor's question, yes, the $23 million includes the 5% step pay for this coming up fiscal year, and it is about $5 million on an ongoing in the next fiscal years for that 5%.
Okay, great, thank you. Carry on.
So the other expense, the last bullet point that I want to kind of point out too is kind of the City Manager Brady just alluded to it, is the public safety overtime. We're working with PD on the overtime. We have been for the last year. They've done a great job of reviewing that, but that is a big expense too that we are taking a look at. That's an expense pressure. Other expense pressures I won't spend too much time on is contracted labor, kind of like the landscaping, custodial, and maintenance. Also, fleet maintenance has significantly risen. That and the repair for third-party costs, parts, and fuel. Software licensing, that is a big one that has come up too. A lot of our software is now going into the cloud, and so transitioning from on-premise or servers that are at the city to the software company's cloud is a significant expense that is going throughout the forecast. And then also, things to consider is decisions on continuing ARPA initiatives with ongoing general fund support. That's one of the expense pressures that we knew was coming. A couple of examples are the downtown Wi-Fi, homeless support, and the behavioral health. So with that, what I wanted to show you here in this chart was the total sources trend. So this is the revenues just for the general governmental fund. And as we talked about and City Manager Brady kind of mentioned, we're also looking at different options that we're discussing internally that we can present to council within the next month or two or more, depending on how the economy goes. So what this does is shows one example of a trend. So the solid line is our actual sources for the past 5 years, from fiscal year 19-20 over to fiscal year 23-24. So in that time frame, we all know that we had the COVID, we had the CARES, we had ARPA, things like that, and then revenues were coming in, sales tax was coming in really good. So we had a plus almost 11% annual growth. So as of 23-24, we're seeing that dip of -4% annual growth, and that is due to the revenue pressures I mentioned was the loss of residential rental, the income tax, flat tax, and then just the slowing of the economy. So we're seeing a dip of the annual growth. And then in 25-26, what we're looking at is hopefully growing out of that with the economy coming back, sales tax going up, and we're projecting about a 3.6% annual growth. So the darker lines are kind of what we're projecting. The light colored line is with residential rental tax. So if we had residential rental tax, that is the difference. That light colored line is where we would be at. So we wouldn't drop as far, but then we would start coming out of it a little bit more. So I just wanted to kind of show you that with the loss of residential rental, we drop a little bit farther down than we would have with it. So in comparison, the next slide shows total uses trends. So in that same period of fiscal year 19-20 through fiscal year 23-24, we saw an annual growth, and this is annual average growth, of 12.4% in our expenses. So in the previous slide, our revenues increased by 10.7, our expenses increased by 12.4. So our expenses increased more than our annual growth in revenue. Now, in the next same time period, the next 3 years, fiscal year 23-24 to fiscal year 25-26, we're seeing an average annual growth of plus 2.5%. So in that previous slide, we were at a -4%, projecting a -4% revenue. So our expenses are increasing significantly than what our revenues are coming in. And then in the outer years, the last 4 years, what we're looking at is kind of a modest growth in our uses of about 1.7%. So in our revenues, we're looking, okay, we're growing out of that, the economy's coming back, so our revenues are higher than our expenses. So those are the kind of the trends I wanted to show you, that our revenues in the previous 5 fiscal years were not keeping up pace with our expenditures, but now hopefully in the next few years, we would be able to grow out of it. But this does also include what City Manager Brady indicated is the 2% exercise that we did in the budget last year, but then also it includes a 2% reduction in expenditures for this coming up fiscal year, which is included in the 25-26. So putting that all together, and this is one example also of some of the options that we're looking at. So putting it all together, the green line is our revenue, our sources trend. The red line is our uses trend. And then the blue line now is our reserve balances. To remind the council, our financial policy for the city council adopts, our revenue, our reserve balance is 8 to 10%. We like to stay within that in the fiscal year. So if you notice, the dark blue line dashed, that is with the dark red and the dark green of what we are looking at in our next year's our forecast. So around fiscal year 28, 29, we drop below that 8 to 10%. And that is because due to the pressures of the expenses that you see within fiscal year 25, all the way growing out, but then also that significant revenue dip that we're losing. So the dashed line is an example of if the public safety support considerations. So for instance, if we went back out to the voters and asked for another 0.25% increase in public safety sales tax dedicated for that. This would give one option to where if that came about and was considered around fiscal year 27, 28, we would then, our revenues would exceed our expenses and we would start growing that fund balance again. And we would hover around where our principles are, where we would like to be around that 15%. We would now start growing back out and stay around that 20%. So this is kind of one option that we're looking at. We're talking with city management of, with this, we lost the residential rental. We are losing portions of our income tax because of the flat tax. We have significant expense growth with the benchmarks, and that is included in here, those benchmarks. And so trying to figure out how to provide that service level, but then also keeping, as I said, with the comparison of keeping in that lower 3 to 4 cities of that being able to do that.
So Mayor and Council, what this tells us, and this is a trend chart, this is not like prophecy of actually what's going to happen. It's a tool for us to understand what's ahead of us, right? When we do budgets, we don't just try to solve for next year. If all I needed to do was to tell you what their budget was for next year, this is a happy-go-lucky conversation. We're in a good shape. But we don't do it that way. We look out 5 years or more and say, okay, what is the trend? What's going to impact us? And so this tells us that we need to start making adjustments now. We're not going to wait 3-4 years from now because you see what's happening in the trends. What it tells us is we need to do a couple of things. We need to continue to work very hard on flattening and reducing our expenses. So we're in the middle of that right now in our conversations with departments. And our conversation is, this is not a one-year conversation. This is a conversation you're probably going to be having for the next couple of years of continuing to tighten our belts, look for more efficiencies, very little growth in new programs, if any, and really trying to find programs that maybe we need to scale back and stay focused on some core projects. But it also suggests that we need to consider, as we've seen some of our surrounding communities, is how do we make up for the loss of $20 plus million in rental tax in the future? And can it be focused on items such as public safety, maybe streets or something like that? So we're just showing you what that option might look like out into the future. But we know first and foremost as a staff, our priority right now is to really help bring that red dashed line as far down as possible. But Council, you're going to hear that we will probably be recommending very little new programs in the coming budget, and probably adjusting and not filling vacancies in a lot of other areas, and a lot of ARPA programs that we've been able to stand up because of those funds probably won't continue into the future. So those are the kinds of framework that we just want to give you. The details, I don't know that we've ever shown a forecast where we say, man, in year 5, we are just going to be rolling in the dough. It never shows that, right? I mean, 5 years ago, we probably thought this year was going to be a disaster. But it helps remind us that we need to work on, different topics, and maybe it's not a year to add a lot of new programs or services. And so it kind of helps us guide us in that conversation. So that's what this is. It's a planning tool. It's a forecast. It's not a prophecy of actual, it's just, here's the best. And you saw all that we loaded up, right? We take the most conservative view, which I think you want us to do. But it does inform us that we do have some work to do over the next couple of years.
Well, Continue on. I guess we have the utility part.
Just a
Your
quick question before we get into utilities. Did Mr. Butler say, or did you, I apologize if I missed it, is a 0.25, I don't know, cent or percent, is about to expire in? No.
He was just suggesting it could be an option.
So it'd be in
to have an
addition?
additional.
Okay, so
yeah,
the one we have in place is ongoing, doesn't have an expiration?
In perpetuity.
Yes, Mayor, Councilmember Duff. This would be in addition to, so right now, the public safety sales tax is at 0.2%, 0.25%. Say we doubled that to 0.5, dedicated just for public safety sales tax, that's what this green line would do. So right now, that 0.25 collects about $30 million roughly annually. So if we did another 0.25, so 0.5%, that would be about 60 million. And then that's where that dashed green line is, just as a consideration for future years of this could be one. Phoenix is doing a 0.5% of their just general city sales tax. And that, I believe, is around just over $100 million that they're hoping to recoup.
And Gilbert is taking.
And Gilbert did a 0.5% also.
0.5%, yeah.
And so now they were at 1.5, now they're at 2, they're equal to us.
Which is same
But we're
as
not,
ours.
right now, this is just putting it
Yeah.
on the table for a conversation, so.
And when does the state budget be put to bed? When is it complete? Do we expect any changes that will affect us because
Yeah, Ian, what
there's
are you
just so
doing?
much in the air right now?
I'll defer to Ian here.
I don't know, do we have to brace ourselves for any unexpected changes that would alter our budget?
Fire drill.
I didn't realize Miranda's here. I'll defer to you. You got it.
Mayor and council, good morning. Councilmember Duff, that's a great question. The state budget does have to be complete by the end of the fiscal year, June 30th. And so the big conversations in regard to the state budget have not, I ran in here, have not happened yet. There are a couple bills that we're watching closely that would have some financial impact. We'll see. I mean, we're only halfway through the session, so we'll see, over time. The state budget does, or the governor and the legislature do have to consider some challenges that they're facing as well. So I don't have a number to present today, but we are monitoring closely.
So we will complete our budget process before they complete theirs? No?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Most likely, we're usually completed by May, right? So.
Because they have their budget challenges, as well as any federal dollars that go from, to the states could be alter as well, so.
Mayor, Councilmember Duff, that's correct. The last couple years, we've seen that the state hasn't passed their budget until the very end of the fiscal year. It is possible that they could pass the budget sooner, but we're still in a wait and see.
What do we do if we pass our budget and there's some major change in which it creates
Like rental regional
disruption?
tax being taken away?
I don't know. Well, I'm afraid,
We have
usually we have projected, if they pass a policy, we have 1 or 2 waiting years to adjust.
Right.
But in today's environment, things are very immediate.
Yeah.
And so we just would have to go back and
Come back to council and have a discussion, yeah.
okay, all right, thanks.
So Mayor and Council, now we'll shift over to the utility section of the forecast.
All right. So we'll just briefly walk through the 5 principles. Similar to general governmental, we have 5 principles on the utility fund side. So balancing the net source and uses, having a 20% or higher reserve fund balance, rate adjustments that are smooth and predictable and smooth throughout the forecast, as we discussed earlier, equity between residential and non-residential rates, and affordable utility services. So just briefly on the utility operations, each utility is operated as a separate business center. That reserve balance that we have in the fund can be used to smooth out rate adjustments, and it can also be used to phase in new programs or changes in operations. These are just some examples of significant capital projects that are either in construction or maybe starting soon. So the first 3 are what we call the big 3. So the Central Mesa reuse pipeline, the Signal Butte water treatment plant expansion, and the advanced metering infrastructure, or what we say AMI. The reuse pipeline and the AMI project are scheduled to be completed in 2027, and the treatment plant expansion, we're expecting to be completed in 2028. The Gansville Road pipe expansion, so this is a gas pipeline, and it's down in the magma service area. It's about 4 miles of installing 12-inch gas pipes, so that's going to allow for continued growth in the magma service area and provide redundancy as well. The Broadway Road improvements with transportation, this is just one project where when transportation reviews their CIP for a street construction project, they'll collaborate with the utilities. And so the utilities will review that section of road that may be under construction and review, do they need to do improvements, replacements, upgrades to the infrastructure under the street. So this next slide, these are some of the significant expense lines in the utility fund, and we're just looking at the 3-year growth rate. So from fiscal 2021 through fiscal 23-24, and looking at the 3-year increase. So we've seen a number of increases over different budget lines in the utility. So fleet maintenance and repair over the 3-year period has increased 61%. This is going to be increased price of parts, labor, fuel. That's all included in there. Solid waste obviously is the biggest user of fleet maintenance and repair.
Fleet maintenance repair, what percentage did you calculate that was related to public safety?
So for general governmental funds, it's about, within general governmental funds, police and fire is about 90% of the fleet expenses.
So you see fleet, I jumped back to the general governmental, but it just reminded me, sometimes you see that fleet maintenance repair. What was the percentage again?
About 90.
Not here, but in the
Yeah.
general government, it's related to public safety too. So don't just think about that as white pickup trucks. It's Tahoes and everything else. I'm sorry, little squirrel moment there, but I just.
Is that due to supply chain and?
No, it's just the cost, right, of those vehicles, the cost of repairs.
Right.
It's trying to get things out there as quickly as possible, but it's just the cost of vehicle maintenance.
I mean, a fire truck is a very specific vehicle with
Right.
specific parts, so they're going to be pretty expensive to repair.
It's just the increase in that cost. It's not how much they are, it's just the fact it keeps going up.
It just goes up.
And Mayor and Council, to that point too, when we see these percentages and these amounts, and kind of what Councilmember Brady was alluding to also, is that the cost.
Never.
We promoted, you promoted.
Sorry, yes, he's promoted from city manager.
I know, I'm not interested.
What City Manager Brady was mentioning was that the costs have not gone down. So when people say inflation, hey, inflation has slowed to 2.5%, 3%. Yes, but that is on top of the cost that it is right now, not what it is. So these costs of, say, solid waste disposal of 9.3 million, 11%, or even the water commodity costs that are at 16, now the 3% is on top of that, not. So the costs are still there and the expenses are still there. And as I mentioned before, as I showed you in the general governmental fund, is that the costs have significantly gone up and the revenues aren't there, but now we're at like a new base of that 3% growing.
And I think our garbage truck repair costs have gone up considerably too, because we weren't able to get new ones and the older ones are more expensive to maintain, if I remember my budget correctly.
So on the fleet, would it also include growth? Because we have additional fire, police stations.
It's not I mean, yes, it is included in there.
Yeah, Mayor, Councilmember Duff, on the utility side, throughout this period, we had such a difficult time getting new trucks that there really wasn't an increase in the amount of vehicles that we received within this time period. For public safety, or for the general governmental fund, which is mostly public safety, I think we did receive some. But within this time period, it was very difficult to actually receive a new vehicle. We had ordered them, but not received them.
And it took about 3 years, 3 to 4 years to get.
Yes.
Can I ask, so the 90%, sorry, I have a mint in my mouth. The 90% of fleet, is that also like, that's cost, but the number of vehicles, what would you say? I mean, is that significantly higher in public safety than the rest of the fleet that we have a city vehicle?
Out there.
Yeah.
Now, we're separating general governmental from utilities, because a lot of the white trucks you see are going to be utilities, right? If you just
So that's
focus
going to
on the
lower the
general
number in
government.
general. There's
Compared to
okay.
like a parks fleet
Yeah.
or, I'm trying to think who else in the general government has a big fleet.
Parks is one of the bigger
Parks is
ones.
the biggest, but after
Okay.
that, it's public safety,
Okay.
right? Parks, yeah, it's Parks is it, right, yeah.
And it, for general governmental, over the 3-year period, the fleet costs increased 47%, so just slightly lower than the 61 we've seen on the utility side, but a similar trend. Next is solid waste disposal. So this is going to include trash, landfill charges, recycling, and green waste disposal. The percentage here is a little bit lower at 11% compared to some of these other line items. However, the contract for these disposal contracts has been, the new contract is in place in this fiscal year, 24-25. Right now, we're projecting those costs for 24-25 to be 10.4, which is 1.1 million over 23-24. And then the full year implementation will be in 25-26. So we're expecting increases the next couple of years due to that. Water commodity cost, so pressure on Lake Mead and the Central Arizona project, portion of the water that we get is responsible for most of this increase. Chemicals at water and wastewater treatment plants. So if anybody has a pool, they've seen those cost increases. And then at Val Vista and the water treatment plant and the 91st Avenue water reclamation plant, the city of Mesa participates in a joint venture with the city of Phoenix on both of these. So the city of Phoenix operates it, and then they charge us for our share. They've seen similar cost pressures with chemicals, power, labor costs increasing. And then on top of that, these two plants are also older than like the Brown Road water treatment plant or the Signal Butte water treatment plant. So they have additional life cycle and operations needs to make sure that those facilities are modern. So this just kind of puts together all of the operating expenses for each of the 5 major utilities from 2021 to 24-25. So looking at the top line there, the green line is wastewater. So the operating costs for wastewater for 24-25 are projected to be 60% higher than what they were in 2021. Similarly, we've seen increases for the others. Even the lowest one there is natural gas, still a 30% increase above where we were at in 2021. So we've seen, cost pressures from various line items, but it's affected all the utilities.
Mr. Howitz.
Thank you. Quick question on that chart. Those lines appear to be heading in a strong upward trajectory. Do you see them continuing in that trajectory after 24-25, or are they going to flatten, or do we have any way of knowing?
Yeah. We're currently, in the budget process and talking with departments. We have seen the growth rate of inflation come down, so it's not, it's kind of decelerating, but still increasing. And so we anticipate that these costs will still increase from 24-25, but not as drastically as what we've seen during this period.
Okay.
Yeah, but I would caution that the future economic environment that we're in right now as a country is uncertain.
Yes.
And a lot of these, and I only mean that because a lot of these utilities rely upon big parts and repairs that could be affected by some of the new policies that are being implemented. So we don't know, but we got to see that. We know some of these big parts do come from overseas, and so we have to watch and see what that means to us.
Well, there could be some tariffs that impact us here.
We just don't know. I'm not going to say we know it today, but it's
economically
just something we rely upon, those pieces of equipment.
So we're saying we're in a rapidly changing environment, and it's going to take a while to really get a handle on that.
It's hard for us to say we know, but we're hoping it starts flattening out.
Thank you.
So now looking at the total sources and uses for the utility fund, we structured this similarly to the general governmental funds that Brian talked about earlier. So the red line is the uses or the expenses. This include the operating costs as well as debt service and all related expenditures. The green is going to be the revenues or the sources. And then the blue is the reserve balance percentage. So you can see in 1920 and 2021, the green line was above the red. So We're increasing the fund balance, but then you can see where the red line jumps up in 21, 22. That's when inflation really started impacting the utility operations. And since then, you can see the red line has been above the green line. So we've been drawing down the fund balance, and you can see that with the decrease in the blue line. And what we're looking at, again, similar to general governmental, is that expenses are higher than the revenues. There is a catch up. So in 28, 29, we're projecting that that they'll basically be equal as far as net sources and uses, and then a slight increase in 29, 30. So that's just kind of a
So there's a
highlight.
window here where we've got some challenges that we're trying to face. We're working with the utilities on seeing what we can do to bend that red now down. But it may mean, but remember, a lot of the big utilities like the water and wastewater, gas and electric, they're so dependent on capital, right? It's just capital intensive. So sometimes that's harder. It's not just operationals. We're going to come back with some interesting ideas on solid waste and talk about our current model of delivery of services and if there's a way to maybe making some changes there. So we're going to look at everything we can to kind of close that gap over the next few years between the green and the red. We get to 28, 29, we think we're in a better spot, but we want to try to move that adjustment or that difference short or close it and get that green back on top. So we have a little work to do. It's just more work to be done. We're just in the middle of it, right? I'm just meeting today with these folks on their budget. So we're just giving you, even before I've had a chance to see what they're proposing to make changes, we don't have that included. We still have a lot of work to do, but we want to at least give you the framework of where we're starting from. So.
Thank you. Vice Mayor?
Oh, after.
I was just going to ask, how do we anticipate the blue line utility revenue reserve fund dipping this way, impacting our bond ratings?
It's an explanation we have to give, right? We have to explain it. What we always show them is historically, again, it's this being very conservative. We will show them that 5 years ago, this is what we thought was going to happen to the reserves, and yet we were able to manage it and keep it at the goal. So we've kind of go show historically, we've never allowed the reserves to drop below whatever, 15% or so, even though we may have had a forecast that said, that year, 5 years before that, it was going to be a problem. So it's just showing them that we will manage this. We will work our way to that, but it just helps us understand we can't just be complacent and think, oh, let's just keep doing the things the way we're doing. We will have to make some adjustments.
Are we seeing these reserve funds dip within the marketplace in other communities?
I don't know.
Do we know?
I'm not sure.
Okay,
Councilmember
we can talk
Summers,
about that.
We have to
usually
take a look and
compare.
see.
Yeah.
I think Mayor and Vice Mayor Summers, I think what's indicative is we're seeing a lot of rate increases from other communities. And so they're doing that to not allow their reserves to dip below.
Yeah, I mean, we're raising ours too, but I think we're using a lot of that capital for the projects that are necessary, particularly water, as we're expecting a CAP cut, significant CAP cut, next year, I think. So we're pouring that into capital while still also bonding for other projects. So it's a little bit of a concern how low this is getting off in the next 3-4 years.
And yet we're doing at a very affordable rate compared to other homeowners. You saw that's what we started off with that. I'm not coming out and saying we're going to solve this with rates. We got to look at both sides. We first want to work on the expense side and see what we can do to try to bend that number down. And then we come back to council and say, here's what we've done and what's the gap and how long do you want to carry this downward trend? We probably don't want to go as far as this graph shows, but it does show that we will correct it. We just like to do it sooner.
Right, and just from an essential services piece, there's no police, fire, there's no city without water. So we have to make these investments.
Ms. Goforth?
I was just curious about the sources and the forecast. Are you assuming the continuation of that smooth adjustment rate each year?
The one we've shown in the past, I think,
Okay.
sometimes we give you that, we show the next 5 years. So we don't change that
Okay.
here.
I don't remember exactly, but it was
It's
still 3 to 4%.
all over the
if
place
you're-
on different ones, and the commercial's a lot higher
Yeah.
than the residential, and all that's in there. We'll have that when we come back on the race, we'll have that conversation.
Well, let's talk about the calendar now. What's next?
So yes, thank you, Mayor. The calendar, what we're looking at is on April 3rd, we'll present the city manager's proposed budget on April 3rd, and then also April 3rd through April 24th, the departments will come up and present their departmental budgets. On May 1, the tentative budget will be reviewed, the wrap-up on May 1, and then also non-utilities. But then also added 2 new dates that I've asterisked there is that the city will be having a city budget and finance community meeting on May 7th. That will be held at the Red Mountain. Tried to get 2, one on one side and one on the other. So one will be at the Red Mountain Rec Center. And then on May 14th, we will also be doing one at the Post. So both sides of the city can come and ask questions. We'll have different tables and different topics of financial, of either budget, but also the ACFR, and then also the transparency we'll have at those. And residents are more than welcome to come ask questions for that. And then after that, on May 19th, the tentative budget will be considered for adoption by City Council. June 2nd, then we'll do the final adoption, and then also with the secondary property tax, and then June 6th will be the property tax.
So Mayor and Council, Mayor, you had asked us to get out into the community as soon as we could with
Thank you.
the budget. So these are the 2 scheduled open houses. I don't know, we're community engagement meetings, so we'll have a lot of the graphs and information you're seeing here and others that we'll have available, and we'll have staff there to field questions and answer questions regarding and we want to get to the point where we have a tentative budget, so there's something in the budget that they can be responding to.
Good. Ms. Schofield? No, ladies first.
I would just say, we heard a couple weeks ago from a District 6 constituent about the community portion of it and the emphasis on not being included in the process at the very end, right? I think that it was felt that maybe that happened in the utility discussion. I'm not saying I necessarily agree with that, but so how are we addressing that, because you have 4 days in between the post and adoption. Is there room for any changes that might be brought up, or,
the city council could make those suggestions, we can, it's just that we're giving council the month of April, and the community can listen in on those, right? It's not exclusive, right? That's a very public process, just like we're doing. Everything we're seeing today is available. So when people say we don't have time, it's like, well, it begins now, right? We put it out there. We'll have all the presentations from the departments will be made available publicly. Of course, this meeting will be broadcast. And then on May 1st, you'll receive the tentative budget and review that. So really from that point forward, it's out there. It's for an opportunity for them to make comment, to provide feedback. So we look at it as really having a whole month of May, right, to be able to do that, so.
Okay, so our answer is tune in on Thursday morning.
Yeah.
Continue to watch every week. And
especially in April. Almost every meeting, yes.
Okay, and on May 1st, the tentative full budget will be presented. So at that point, have your questions ready, I guess, for.
Right. And we're just trying to find dates where we can actually go physically out there, but community members can, obviously, through the social media, can have lots of opportunities for them to engage.
Mayor, Councilmember Goforth, we also are taking the idea from Mr. Brady and Mr. Butler on setting up an email address and an online forum so that throughout the budget process, we can receive the comments and concerns from the citizens. And we'll be looking at that
But
as
they
well.
don't just have to come show up on the 7th or the 14th. They can, at any time, submit those questions.
The only thing I'm going to say, and I don't know if we can fix it this year, but I appreciate the 2 public meetings, one at the Post and one at Red Mountain. But from the Post to Red Mountain is 11 miles, and from Red Mountain to my house is 12. So Southeast Mesa is considerably farther than you think. So having a meeting down in that area for the residents that live in that portion of town would be appreciated.
Well, I think to do that, when you get your new library, we can hold it there. How about that?
I like the new library, it's very nice.
Yeah. I think we all signed our names on that.
Yes, we did.
So, yes, Mayor, that's pretty much our presentation.
So I'll just, if there's no other questions, I'll just conclude by, those who are listening, we're a full-service municipality. We do everything. And there's a cost to that. And we're trying to look at efficiencies within each of our departments. And that's what I appreciate, because if we don't plan today, we're going to be behind for tomorrow, the next coming years. And I don't want to do what other municipalities have to do as far as wastewater. We'll have to go out to the public if we even consider a sales tax increase, which we're not doing. I want to be perfectly clear, we're not doing that. But we have to look for options in the future. So I appreciate you bringing that all. And I want our employees to know in the city that we stand behind you, all the departments. We understand there's some trying times until we get through this dip and figure out what's going on in the future. So I appreciate your diligence with that. So again, we're looking at efficiencies within our city. With that, thank you, Council. Anything else? All right, great. Well, item 2 is to acknowledge the receipts of minutes. Somebody want to do that? Ms. Spilsbury and stuff. Thank you. All in favor, say an aye. 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 Motion passes. Summary of conferences and events attended by council. Does anybody want to? We've had in and out, all of us, throughout this past week. You want to go? You're okay? Okay. We're excused, Mr. Heredia.
I'll go real quick. On Tuesday, I was able to speak to a group of students from Mesa High at the Family Resource Center at the main library, and they're the students that are studying early childhood development careers, so that was really fun. And then on Wednesday, I got to go read to the first graders at Johnson Elementary. I know you did the kindergartners the day before me for Read Across America Week, which was super fun.
Yeah. And you were at something yesterday. The Education Workforce Roundtable?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, we had our quarterly Education Workforce Roundtable meeting. We got to introduce our new mayor there and hear him talk about his priority for education efforts in our city, partnering with our great education community. And that's always a great meeting.
Yeah, yourself and the chairman.
We're ready.
Okay. Anyone else?
Yeah, can I? Oh, I'm sorry, I jumped in. On Tuesday, I attended the ASU Smart Region Summit, and it's an all-day event in downtown Phoenix. It was amazing. I went last year and kind of learned a little bit about digital twins, but it seems like this year, leading into digital twins and AI and how it applies to cities as well as businesses is really taken off significantly. They're using digital twins for efficiency and scenario modeling, and moving from a data-based knowledge to intelligence predictive knowledge, and moving from ROI to an ROE, experiential and efficiency measurements, because the intelligence, the AI can anticipate and predict where we are in a more comprehensive manner than just looking at past-based scenarios. And even in public safety, it was amazing how they could have a incident live for all parties that are involved in it, and they can see where they are. They could already have the area cordoned off before they arrive. It's just, so the real-time thing on public safety is just tremendous, and then also using that in training scenarios where they recreate the event. And economic development, using it for site selections, for cities to visit your city and see different elements of it. It's just vast, and I look forward to learning how we can use some of these elements to increase our efficiency in Mesa. Thanks.
Thank you, council member.
I just have one. I attended the celebration over at Boeing. They delivered their 50th remanned Apache E model to the British Army. So that was an exciting day for them. We're happy that they manufacture the Apache, which continues to be the warfighter of the sky in the world. So glad that they do that here in Mesa.
Great.
They package those over at Sky Harbor. It's kind of fun to watch that, how they get it ready to ship over. Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Brady, what's
Yes,
our
we'll see you next
schedule?
Thursday, March 13th, for our study session. Thank you.
Okay. All
So
right.
moved.
I'll entertain a motion to move. I've heard it. Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
There was a second by Ms. Spilsbury, by the way.
She just